Good day, my name is Michael Molondo and I'm going to present the subject of HIV/AIDS Studies 3 for the higher diploma. So I'm going to look at the 8 assignments which is then which is required from you to submit. So I'm going to discuss the 8 assignment and which will form as a basis or as a guide for you to complete your assignment. The first one is assignment 1. It's looking at the Constitution of Namibia, and what it actually says there that the Constitution of Namibia give guarantee that it will protect the right of all citizenship. So in this assignment, we're going to look specifically at the Labor Act. And then we're also going to look at the employees and their workplace for people living with HIV/AIDS. Then the second assignment is looking at the economy of Namibia, and then also see how does HIV/AIDS affects the economic growth of a country like Namibia. And then we're going to look specifically at the impact of HIV/AIDS on the education sector in Namibia. Then the third assignment will then look at the HIV/AIDS at the workplace. What is a workplace policy? How can you choose the right workplace of policy? And then in this assignment, you can choose any company, ministry of your choice. And then number 1, you're going to look at, do they have a workplace policy in place? Secondly, what does the workplace policy entails? Thirdly, how effective is the workplace policy? Fourthly, are there any challenges? And number 5, then you have to give some recommendation. The sixth assignment is then also looking at the statistics in Namibia, looking at what are the current trend of HIV infection in Namibia, what are the cases, and what is Namibia doing as a country. The fourth assignment is then also looking again at HIV policy, but then you're going to look at the issue of culture within any organization. What role does culture play? And especially looking at, and what are the challenges that one can face when it comes to cultures or organizational culture. The sixth one is looking at a project proposal that you have to be designed. You want to start the Orphans and Vulnerable Children project in Oshakati or in Windhoek or wherever you stay. Then it's expected for me to prepare a proposal. So what does this proposal entail? So we're going to talk a little bit about project proposal. Then the seventh assignment is we're going to look at a rapid appraisal method. What is a rapid appraisal method? Because when you are going to use a principle of monitoring and evaluation as a methodology, then a rapid appraisal method is one of the tools that you can use when it comes to monitoring and evaluation. So we are going to discuss about monitoring and evaluation, and then the rapid appraisal method as a tool. What is this tool? How are you going to use it? And then, of course, the eighth assignment is you are going to be asked to monitor a program. You are just being appointed as a program health officer or a program manager for an overseas organization. So you have to come up with a policy or formulate a policy that will guide the organization to implement and then also to monitor its health program. So it's expected from you now to explain the steps that you will follow to formulate this policy. Now, assignment number 1 is, as I said, it looks at the issue of the Namibian the Namibian Constitution, and specifically at the Labor Act. So you are going to look at the Labor Act, and what you want to discuss, you want to see is how does the Labor Act protect the employees or the workers. And when you look at the Namibian Labor Act, then of course you need to compare the Namibian Labor Act to the IOL code, which is the International Organization of Labor. It's a UN body. You have to look at the code of employment, the code of practice, and compare that with the Namibia Labor Act, and look, are there any gaps for an example, within the Namibian Labour Act that needs to be addressed, and is there any challenges for the Namibian government to implement this Labour Act to protect the rights of employees, especially when it comes to their health, like HIV/AIDS. Then, of course, the rights of employees. When you look at the Namibian Labour Act, does it promote the protection of the rights of these employees, and how does it protect the rights of these employees? And again, as I said earlier, is in your assignment you have to bring out the gaps, the challenges within the current Namibia Labour Act. And does the current Namibia Labour Act also address the issue of HIV/AIDS? And if, what kind of issues or aspects do they cover in the Namibia Labour Act? In your assignment, you have to diagnostically analyze the different aspects of HIV/AIDS which the Namibia Labour Act address. And if they address this, then of course you have to give practical example and explain in detail what it covers when it comes to the right of employees and especially their health. The second assignment is, there is also a copy of the Namibian Labour Act. Of course, you can look at the Constitution, and there are specific articles 21 that you can look at, which can also help. And as I said earlier, you have to look also at the Labour Act number 11, which can explain in detail. The second assignment is then looking at education sector. When we look at the education sector and we look at HIV/AIDS, the question that everybody asks is, does HIV as a pandemic and AIDS pandemic have any negative impact on the education sector? And when we look at the education sector, we are looking for, of course, at its employees, the teachers. We are looking at the learners itself. We are looking at the systems. So now it's very important that in your assignment you first start with, when we talk about the education sector, are we talking about the ministry, which is the custodian of the education sector? When we talk about education sector, does it also include the schools? Does it include the higher education, the tertiary education? And who are or what are the education sector? That's what you first start. The second, then you'd start with teachers. When we talk about HIV/AIDS, what negative impact does HIV has on teachers? Teachers that are becoming infected, so there are so many factors that you have to look at. And then secondly, the learners itself, the students. How does HIV/AIDS impact the learners or the school children? As early as from primary school up to tertiary school, higher education, and then also looking at students at university level. And then, of course, you look at the system itself. Does the education system in Namibia address the issue of HIV/AIDS? And when we talk about the education system, we are talking from primary level, secondary level, up to tertiary level. And tertiary level is about the university itself, or other colleges, which is after school. So you have to discuss the system as a whole. Does the system address this issue, or does it not address this issue? And then, of course, mitigation. You have to ask is what mitigation are in place, what steps do we need to take, what solution do you recommend, what are your recommendations to address, number one, the impact on the teachers, the impact on the learners, and then the impact on the education system. So you have to discuss it, of course, with practical examples. Then the third assignment is looking at the workplace policy. Now, the workplace policy is very important. It's almost like compared to assignment number one. You're first going to discuss what is a workplace policy, HIV workplace policy. Then, because every workplace do have policies in place, they have got human resources policy, administrative policies, they've got occupational health policies. Now, in their policy, do they address HIV/AIDS? Now that's number one. You're first going to identify a ministry, you're going to identify an organization or a company. Then the first question you ask, what policy does this organization or ministry have in place? Number two, These policies which they have in place, does it include HIV/AIDS? Number 3 is, what do they address about HIV/AIDS? Number 4 is, when they address the issue of HIV/AIDS, are there any gaps in this policy? And then, of course, you can also bring out, as I say, in assignment number 1, you can bring out the, when you talk about workplace policy, you have to talk about the International Labour Organization Code of Practice, of Code of Conduct, or Code of Employment. So, and this is where you can also discuss the issue of the tripartite partners. Now, tripartite talks about the 3 partners, talks about number 1 partner is the government, and number 2 partner is, of course, it's the employee or the employer, which is the company itself or the ministry. And the 3rd partner is, of course, is the employee themselves. Some people use the 3rd partner as the some of the international organization, but my stance is, when you look at the concept of the workplace policy in any company, like in Namibia, you have to look at 3 people that are involved. For the 3 entity is the government, the employer, which is the company, and then the employee itself. So you have to bring out the tripartite concept, which is very important. And then we go to the 4th assignment, where you are going to look at Namibia. And you look at the issue of the prevalence of HIV. You're going to look at the different statistics. Then, of course, you're going to look at the issue of the current HIV prevalence. Where are we as a country when it comes to the HIV prevalence? You're going to look at the teenage pregnancy statistics, the latest statistics. You are going to look at the STI infection statistics. And while I'm saying you have to look at the statistic, because in your assignment, when you are going to discuss the issue of the new infection in Namibia, you have to bring out those different factors. And of course, you have to substantiate your answer or support your answer with factual information. If you are talking about HIV infection, of course, it talks about unprotected sex. And having unprotected sex means that you can get pregnant. And also having unprotected sex means that you can be infected with STIs, sexually transmitted infection or diseases. So these, when in your assignment, you have to have a holistic or comprehensive approach when you talk about the HIV infection. You talk about how HIV infection, what are the co-infection that you can have, and then what impact does it have, of course, on the nation itself as a country. Then the 1st assignment, you are going to look at the policies. What policies do we have in Namibia? And when I talk about policies, I'm talking about the national policy on HIV/AIDS. I'm talking about the different workplace policies which are in place. I'm talking about the AIDS Charter that we have in place. Policies, for example, we can use also the employment, the law of employment, act of employment in Namibia. Of course, those are some of the things. Now, and in this, you can also discuss the whole framework for action. And when I talk about the framework for action, I'm talking about the NSF, which is the National Strategic Framework on HIV/AIDS. Some countries call it the National Plan on HIV/AIDS, but in Namibia we have the framework, which is the NSF. So discuss it in detail. What role does it play? And are these policies and this framework that we have in place, are they workable? Are they making any impact, any difference? Can we talk, when we look at the multi-sectoral approach, for example, does it address those issues? When we look, for example, at the different bureaucracy that we have in the country, the different culture that we have in the country. So, and in the light of that, of those policies, whether they are workable or not workable, then you have to discuss the challenges in implementing these policies. What are the different challenges? What are the issues that can be experienced? And how can we address, for example, these issues? And then, of course, you will conclude with the needs of people living with HIV/AIDS. Does it address the need of people living with HIV/AIDS? Now, the sixth assignment is you are tasked to write a proposal, and you're going to focus on orphans and vulnerable children, and you have to select a town, whether it's in Oshakati, Windhoek, Wolfish Bay, doesn't matter where you are. You choose your town, and then the title or the name of your project is Overseer of Orphans and Vulnerable Children. So you are then tasked to come up with a project proposal. Now, for the sake of this presentation, I'm not going to give you the detail or the component of the project proposal. So I will recommend you that you have to look at other sources like the internet, the Google, or go to library, or look for any other example of how or what a project proposal intends. Now, I'm quickly going to discuss why you need a project proposal. So there are three main reasons why you need a project proposal. The first thing and the foremost important why you need a project proposal is for funding. You need money to implement your project. You need funding to make sure that you are going to have a project in place, and that project is going to be there to address the need of the community. So proposal is there to get money. The second reason why you need a project proposal also is that you are not going to implement the project alone. You need the assistance of the local authority, which will come on board as a stakeholder. You need the cooperation of the government, which means the Ministry of Gender, which needs to come on board to look at the legal framework of orphans and vulnerable children. And then the other stakeholders, the community themselves. So how are you going to involve the different community organizations within the town so that you can have a multi-sectoral or coordinating cooperation within the different stakeholders? Then, of course, the third reason why you need a project proposal is if you say that your project will run over a period of 2 years, the question that most donors are asking is, after 2 years and there is no more funding, how are you going to sustain the project? Which means, how are you going to create more funding, or how are you going to have, and for example, talking about sustainability, there are so many activities that you can follow, like income generating project, gardening, and so on. So that's the three main reasons that you can have why you need a project proposal. Then we're quickly going to go to the assignment number 7, where we're going to look at the monitoring and evaluation. So you have to monitor your project, you have to evaluate. Now, as part of that, there are many tools that you can actually use. And one of the most effective tools that you can use is the rapid appraisal method. Now, now in your assignment, you have to say how you're going to use it, what the project is all about, how you're going to use this tool, and also when you are going to use this tool, is how are you going to make sure that in this tool you're going to participate, you will ensure that all stakeholders are going to participate or are going to be involved. So the first thing, there's a few thoughts that I want to share with you why a rapid appraisal method is very good. The first thing is of course you want to get quick information. And the information that you're normally going to ask during the rapid appraisal method is you are going to look at the problem. How does the beneficiary look at the problem? Second one is why is a problem a problem? What are the reasons that they are having this problem? Number 3 is looking at this problem, are there any possible solutions or intervention? Number 4 is what method are you going to do to implement this solution or to address the problem? And there are two kinds of research methodology that you can actually follow, which is the qualitative or the quantitative method. And I will ask you that you have to go and look. Now, qualitative is looking more at the problem itself, how it affects the community, and it's more on the social aspect. quantitative looks more at the number of the problems, the statistics, the methodology, the mathematical methodology that can be followed to address the specific problem. So you have to choose what kind of method you're going to use in the rapid appraisal method. Some people are also using a mixed method, but rapid appraisal is very much more popular when it comes to the qualitative kind of method. So when you are going to use a qualitative method, rapid appraisal is quite an effective tool that you can use. Then you've got the participatory approach, because rapid appraisal is very participatory, which means you will involve the whole community. Now, the last assignment that you are going to do is you are going to request it as a program manager to come up with a policy. You have to formulate a policy because this policy is going to be in your organization and you have to implement it. Now, the question is, how are you going to implement this policy? So the first thing is, now I've given you a diagram which you can follow, which is just a guide for you to follow. But at the end of the day, you as the program manager, you have to make the final decision. The first thing that you're going to do before you're going to formulate any policy, you first need to look at what are the issues in that organization. If the issue is HIV/AIDS, then you are going to look at the history, the background. Where did the problems or the issue arise from? Where did it originate? Then the first thing under that is then you're going to define the problem. What is the specific problem that's in the organization? And you can go straight. Then the second part of that, is you can with a problem. Then you say, okay, for me to address this problem, is I'm going to use certain method in order to obtain the information or collect the information, and then analyze the information from the problem which I've identified. And then, of course, the third part of the block is then the stakeholders. In all this process of identifying the problem and data collection and analyzing the method, you have to involve the different stakeholders. In your organization, you start with management and then the employees. And of course, the question that you can ask yourself is, what can we do as an organization? And once you have formulated this policy, then of course the policy must not just be a beautiful document that will collect dust. The question you will ask is, this policy that we have formulated, how are we going to implement it? How is it going to work? And these are the questions that you have to ask yourself as an employee. And then, of course, also the other thing that you have to look at, the diagram that I've also given you is, as I said, you left-hand side, you start with a problem, you discuss the issues, and as you can see, it's a whole framework that you can follow in order to address the issue of policy and how you're going to formulate the policy. So it's very important that you have to look into this, and in your assignment you can bring that out, you can discuss this in detail, and you can also come with different scenarios. So I hope that this presentation has helped you, and I wish you all the best with your assignment, and I thank you for listening to me.